Welcome to Solar Insiders, a podcast reporting on the people, technologies and policies shaping the world's biggest energy source. Presented by Sophie Vorath, the editor of Renew Economy and One Step Off the Grid, and Rachel Williamson, senior reporter at Renew Economy. Solar Insiders is proudly brought to you by Pylon, the essential solar design tool to grow your solar business with quick and effortless proposals that will impress your customers. And Goodwe, the global solar inverter and energy storage company behind the all-in-one ESA battery system, who are proud to work with Australian cricketer and Goodwe ambassador Alex Carey.
Hello and welcome to Solar Insiders. My name is Sophie Vorath. I am the editor of Renew Economy, and joining me today and as always is Rachel Williamson. How are you, Rachel?
I'm well. How are you doing, Soph?
Yes, not too badly, thank you. Not too badly. It has been another very busy couple of weeks, although we did miss a week of Solar Insiders last week, so we're doing a bit of catch up, and we have a few bangers for you in the shoot. But the first one we're going to start with this week is an interview that I did at the end of last week with Rob Amphlett Lewis, who is from Ausgrid, which is Australia's largest distribution network company. And as a refresher for those who don't live and breathe energy markets, distribution networks are the poles and wires company that are between the big transmission towers and our households that deliver electricity to us and around the major suburban grids and make sure that we have power. And they, generally speaking, do a very good job of it. They are monopoly companies that are highly regulated, meaning that they have pretty much one job and they need to do that well. In the past in Australia, there's been a lot of, I guess what would you say, Rach? It's been a bit of a dialogue, a bit of a theme where networks have, I guess,
taken advantage.
I'm trying to find a delicate way of saying it. Because of the position they've been in, let's say they've maybe over built their networks. It was known as gold plating at one point, and it was a thing, but we're talking a while ago now. And as with everything in the energy market at the moment, it's all moving very quickly, and networks amongst everybody else have had to adapt and are trying to adapt. There are many among us who are still very skeptical that they have consumer interests at heart. But Rob, who I've spoken to before for Solar Insiders, and you've spoken to, Rach, for an interview, a great interview you did with him last year. With Rob, he's great to speak to because he's a very progressive. He's happily admits the areas where network companies have done some damage to trust and so forth in the past. But I guess his argument is we are rebuilding the grid in this sort of big complex puzzle, and it requires a lot of different pieces. Obviously, we're not going to be without grids anytime soon, no matter how much we innovate. So networks need to find their niche. And I guess the reason why we're talking to Rob this week is because this all came up again last week. I'll maybe pass over to you, Rach, to talk about, because last week, even though I did the story, you've done a lot on this subject. The ENA finally came out with its request for the network companies. The ENA is kind of the network body, lobby group, came out and asked the national rulemaker, please, can we be involved in curbside EV charging? Can we lead it? Because we're in a really great position to do that. And it's not a ridiculous argument. I actually find it quite compelling. But yes, I'll turn it over to you as to why that's controversial.
Yeah. People who are not the networks hate this idea. They hate it so much because like the networks, the distributors, they own the power pole. They own the lines going to the power pole. And so anyone who wants to access that power pole and those lines have to pay them a fee. And the distributor does not have to pay the fee to access it, to put an EV charger on it. Now, that makes it possible for the distributor to roll these things out really easily, because they can just say, okay, I'll put one there, put one there, put one there, fine. But it does mean that there is the potential for curbside EV charging to just become another part of the monopoly with no competition possible, because they just lock any others out, because everyone else has to pay the fee. And so that's what people really hate, because we're at the point where we really are starting to need curbside chargers, and we really need to start to have quite a few of them. But of course, when you're doing it in a competitive way, it takes a lot longer to get started. And
and I think the argument is it's still competitive. We would keep it competitive. We would just put the infrastructure there, and then it would still be a competitive. But I think there's this very strong suspicion on the other side of the equation saying, well, that we've heard this before. It hasn't turned out that way. We've seen some botched things like smart meter rollouts, where it's ended up being very inefficient and not so economical. And the problem is that whatever the network does to augment its grid, whether it's putting up new poles and wires or putting in curbside charges, that gets passed on to the consumer to pay for. And that's the ultimate thing that we've got to watch out for. And to take another little swerve here, what I wasn't actually talking to Rob about this issue, but this is why it came up. And it's because one of the other issues that networks are criticised for is their involvement in community energy storage. And it's this, it's even been named poorly. It was one of the very early policies of the Albanese Labor government to pour a whole lot of money into distribution network batteries. So basically the idea back then, and this is well before they came up with the idea for home battery rebates, was that this is a much fairer way to roll out storage, because not everyone will be able to afford it. Not everyone will be able to add it. We'll put it where it's needed on the grid, and it will soak up excess solar, and then that will mean that networks don't have to do as much work to their grids, costs will come down, we'll be able to load shift, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the theory. Of course, again, it's not an area that networks usually play in. They've had to seek waivers to become a part of it. And there have been quite a few sandbox exercises where they've put in their own batteries, and I think they were some of the biggest winners out of that government rebate in the end. And again, that was highly criticised. Among the sort of fiercest critics is Tristanides, who did write for us a while ago, noting how much more expensive it was to do storage that way than compared to home batteries. But and Rob sort of was keen to get on and just discuss it and say, well, things are changing, costs are coming down, we're actually doing it very efficiently now. And one of the main reasons for this podcast, this very, very long-winded intro, is that Ausgrid offers this thing called energy storage as a service, which I had no idea about. It could be because I'm not a New South Welshman. So it's basically offered through a couple of retailers. I think there are a couple of the big three. I can't remember exactly which, but Rob says in the podcast. But basically, if you happen to have one of Ausgrid's batteries in your vicinity, you can sign up to energy storage as a service, and it's basically a guaranteed $200 off your annual bill.
I think it's Energy Australia, Origin, I think, and one other. I don't think it's
But I think it's a fantastic idea. I don't think I will ever be able to get a battery from my situation. I'm certainly not a have-not. I have a bit of solar, but not much. But I don't think I have off-street parking, and I have on-street parking. I don't have off-street parking, and I don't think I'll be able to have a battery. So both of these things interest me very much in that I want to see what the networks have to offer on this front and whether it can be good for people like me. And, I think it's absolutely worth having these conversations. And Rob's a great person to have them with. And as I say, he's very open to criticism and to to having people disagree, I think this is the important thing. We just have to keep these conversations going and ensure that all of the regulators, the rule makers are also doing their jobs, which are, really important part of keeping the networks honest is, if you don't set the right rules, chances are they're not going to, they're going to push the boundaries. So, yeah. Anyhow, let's hear from Rob and see what everyone thinks about this energy storage as a service, which I think is a fantastic idea in theory. Here is Rob Amphlett Lewis from Ausgrid. Rob Amphlett Lewis, welcome to Solar Insiders.
It's great to be back with you, Sophie.
It's great to have you back. We are back to talk about the perennial issue, which has come up again this week, of where do networks fit in the big scheme of the energy transition, in particular on the consumer side of the equation. And it's come up this week because the Energy Networks Australia put in a rule change request to the AEMC, to the market rulemaker, asking for some changes to the rules so that distribution network companies can be a part of curbside EV charging, which I have to say, to me, sounds eminently sensible and quite reasonable. But there's a lot of, we're not going to be talking about that today on our podcast. I'll just flag that now. But it has raised the old debate, and what it made me notice is there are a lot of sort of really deep-seated opinions in the industry, in energy industry, and I think there's a obviously we've had a very regimented market in the way it's been set up for quite a long time, but that is all changing. And another area where there's been a lot of this discussion is around energy storage. So what position do networks have with distributed energy storages, in particular community batteries? And I did mention it in my article during the week. And there's, debate around the cost and the efficiencies and what it, whether it really benefits consumers. And we thought it's a great time to have a new conversation with you guys at Ausgrid, because it's changing all the time. We know that costs are coming down. Everything is changing all the time. The rules, the technology, the way we apply all of the above. So it's really interesting. And one thing that you guys have that we really haven't discussed before is this energy as a service, which involves your community batteries and actually providing a very distinct service to consumers. So I guess maybe if we start by talking about that.
Yeah, sure. So, maybe even reverse a little bit and add sort of the EV charging in just for a second to start us off.
That's fine.
The energy transition, in my mind, is such a big challenge, and it's a challenge across a load of different areas. And I just don't think we can reasonably expect to be able to solve those challenges if we have 1/3 of the industry sit on its hands. So, and network businesses are full of people who are technically quite competent, who have ideas, who want to make a difference and are going to lean into it. And you've seen that in terms of the conversation we at Ausgrid and other networks are trying to create about what more we can do to support the energy transition. We feel obligated, honor bound to do that. So that's why we're in these debates and why we're pushing to do more. Now, it's absolutely reasonable that we should be challenged on that, and we should have a good debate and a good conversation, because only through those conversations will you get to the right answer. And that we acknowledge that in the past, there's been accusations of gold plating, and there probably wasn't the most efficient business. Ausgrid wasn't the most efficient business in the early 2000s. We know that, and I think there's a lot of actions being taken to make us a much more efficient business. So I just think we should be judged on our capabilities and our merits today, not our merits in the past. And, we should be given a fair crack to be able to have that debate about where we can do more. And things like using the polls to help solve a market failure in EV charging is one. And one that I'm super passionate about, and you and I have spoken about, this is about community batteries and energy storage as a service. And this is basically, where we can roll out a larger battery in a community that allows someone to sign up to this sort of virtual partition of a battery, which gives them energy storage as a service, gives them around a $200 saving on their bill, allows them to access some of the savings that those who can afford solar can afford to put a battery in their garage or on their wall, can afford to charge an EV at home. Give everyone access to some of those savings, because at the moment, and we've talked about this before, my great concern and Ausgrid's great concern is that we have a two-speed transition where those who have can have a much lower bill. They put solar on the roof, they put a battery on the wall, they charge their EV at home, and energy costs have gone down for them. So we have the haves, having a great time, and a lot of the cost of the system is then therefore covered by the have-nots. And all of us know that doesn't work. That's not going to work forever. So what can we do? And community batteries, energy storage as a service is one of the ways that we think we can provide access to those benefits for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, it's of great interest to me as well, because I'm not a have-not. I've got solar on my roof, but I can only fit 3 kilowatts on there because it's an odd roof. And I don't have a battery and won't be able to have a battery. And I have off-street parking. So all of these things are actually really important to me, and I don't see them, as far as for me, as being easily solvable. So there does need to be solutions. And, I think we also have to acknowledge that all of the people who've taken up solar and batteries are doing a greater good to the broader grid and helping to bring costs down. So it's not all about sort of, I think sometimes it's problematic also framing it as a have-not situation. But I absolutely see what you mean as far as it needs a whole lot of solutions, that needs to cater to a whole lot of different needs. And that's what's really interesting. And to not sort of hopefully fall back into these divisive arguments that don't really get anywhere would be a great help to start with.
And you're right on the haves and have-nots, because a lot of the people who have solar and batteries are not not wealthy people. But they've lent in and they're doing the right thing by the system, and they're looking to reduce their energy bill. So that's very sensible. And look, we've been delighted to see the uptake of the home battery storage program that the government's rolled out. I think that's great to see just the amount of storage that's been put in. But we're focused on the gap, and the gap is those who can't, for whatever reason that is. And we're also focused, because it's our job to focus on the health of the system. And so the system needs storage which is scheduled, managed by market participants to be doing the right thing in the instance that it's needed to be done. So when there's a trough or there's a peak in prices, are those storage assets going to perform in the way that's going to help the market lift the trough, bring down the peak, create a bit of stability, lower our energy costs for all? And the good thing about the community batteries is they're operated by market participants who are active in the market to maximize and optimize that asset. The other thing they do for us is they help us manage voltage and help us manage local peak constraints. So it's doing two things, for a network and for a market participant. Market participant controls it most of the time, and only when there's a network constraint do we pull it and use it to manage the power quality or the local issues, constraints in the local area. And then, the win, that's a win-win. And where the win-win-win comes from is that the retailers can sign their customers up to a product that saves them $200 on their bill. And that's a win-win-win. It doesn't in any way say don't do behind-the-meter batteries, home batteries. What it says is, here's a really cool other solution that addresses people who can't access that. And guess what? It's cheaper and requires a lower subsidy than a home battery does to get it off the ground. So that makes sense because of the scale. So that's why we're so passionate about it, I suppose.
Yeah. And I think that's we'll go into a bit more of the detail about this energy as a service, because I think that's probably one of the problems with the community battery narrative is that it's been a bit sort of nebulous for consumers to go, well, how is it, benefiting me? I'm not sure. It's hard to see, and there's so many parts of an electricity bill, and this is what we always see too, people, it's very confusing. We talk about, large scale renewables coming on and reducing prices, which they have done. But then there are many other factors going into these bills that then put pressure the other way, and people tend to think, well, why aren't renewables doing their job, when there are a lot more other things going on contributing to that. But what I'm getting to is that it's difficult to sort of show consumers the benefit of these shared batteries in their bills, but if they're actually signing up to something and getting
a direct benefit,
then that's a whole other story. And I for one didn't really know this was on offer.
Yeah, so we've got 2,500 customers on this energy storage as a service product through Origin and Energy Australia now, and as we're rolling out these batteries, we've got this is the beginning. As we've seen with the home batteries, they've been around for a long time, and it's taken a while for them to really take off. But now this is taking off for us, and we're getting the costs right down. But right now, with the storage that we've put out across our network, we've got almost 250,000 customers who are or will be very shortly eligible to sign up to a product that will give them a $200 saving. So that's meaningful, and we're super proud of that. So it's horses for courses. This is a great solution. You're right, though. It's hard for people to see this is a community asset because they don't necessarily understand what we mean by community asset. I must say, I think we talked about this previously. I was surprised a little bit by the sort of the negative reaction to the term community battery. We genuinely used that term, and we don't monopolise the naming rights for these things. If someone's got a better name, go for it. But because the battery is embedded within the community and provides network benefits to everyone in the community and will provide access to energy storage as a service and $200 savings to anyone in that community downstream of that asset who wants to sign up to a product. So that's why we said community battery. But I think people think it's a marketing term and it doesn't benefit the community. Whereas really because it's a network asset supporting the community and it provides an additional saving to members of the community, we felt that was the right term. But happy to change that term if it's
no. And I think it's a great term as well. I think the confusion is that traditionally, I suppose, in energy, community energy has always meant, a group of
owned by the community.
Yeah, owned by the community. And look, I think there are a few of those. So far, the feedback we've heard is it's quite difficult to set those up. There's a lot, and I guess, it's not everyone's field of expertise. And I think the problem is you have to then find the right spot for on the grid. You have to do all of this stuff. And while it may be worth it for sure, it definitely, you'd have to factor that in.
And I think that's absolutely right. And I think that's one of the things that we've learned is that, our experience in managing distributed assets across the community is actually really valuable for us in terms of rolling out this storage. So, things like land availability, we've got bits of land within our substations that we can pop a battery in that's not being used. So that makes it easy for us to do that, and it lowers the cost, and that's benefits everyone. That gives you lower cost storage coming into the system. But also, the policies, the procedures, the understanding of fire risks, the understanding of, noise issues, community consultation, is day in, day out part of our DNA because we're doing this all the time. And I think if you're coming at it as a community, organisation trying to build an asset, we'll always be 100% supportive. And we've got great tariffs that mean that community batteries owned by others, pay very little in terms of network connection costs. So we're looking to support them, but it's not easy if you don't have the policy procedures, the depth of experience, the capability, the workforce, all of those things. It's harder, and we're lucky, and so as a result of being in this position, it's an obligation on us to use those capabilities and advantages in a way that provides low cost storage to our community members.
And where are we in the regulatory sense on this? Most of the time now, as I understand it, you guys, networks are doing this as part of a waiver from the ring fencing rules. Where do you see this going? Is it looking like rules will be changed, or will you just have to keep applying for waivers?
Well, I mean, I think it's still TBD. We're certainly having a conversation with the AER about this, and we'll, as part of our next regulatory determination, be pushing for this to be a part of our sort of standard suite of services that are regulated in a sort of thoughtful and consistent way. We're also talking to government. I think the good thing that Chris Bowen and his department have done is sort of given the opportunity for us all to lean in and prove ourselves. And I think that's where we're at the moment, is saying, well, there's been quite a few naysayers on this, and now let's lean in and get the track record. Let's get the runs on the board to be able to say, you know what, we say we can do this, and look, we're delivering a solution which is cheaper, more accessible to everyone. It's able to be rolled out at scale. We're doing it well now, and on that basis, it's a legitimate competitor, or not competitor, but it's a legitimate additional tool in the armory that we need to combat climate change and drive forward the energy transition. And on that basis, we should be doing more of it. So I think we're all at that stage. And one of the things I'm super proud of is when we went out and asked for funding within the ARENA funding round, we got funding for, I think it was 8 5-megawatt units. And as we've seen our capabilities improve and the cost of the units come down, and we work out processes and that allow us to do this quicker, and copy paste in terms of designs and stuff like that. We're now delivering these units at less than $25 per kilowatt hour. When if you compare that against the government's own figures around behind the meter storage, which are up in the $3.50 per kilowatt hour, and likely to come down as unit costs come down. But even the government's own forecast shows that in 2030, for the bigger home batteries, the subsidy is likely to be sort of close to $70, and we're today at under 25. And the things that will drive those costs down, which are generally the manufacturing cost, the manufacturing base expanding, scale advantages coming, that drive the unit cost of the battery cells down themselves. Those cost advantages are going to come to us. So if we're at 25 today, where are we going to be in 2030? And my aspiration and expectation is we should be able to do this, with very limited funding at all by 2030. Aspirationally, I think we should be able to do it without any subsidy at all. And that would be the greatest validation of the subsidy approach there could be, is that you've subsidized it through the knowledge curve, and now it's been a success. Subsidy is not necessary. We're away, and it's just an inbuilt part of the energy system that provides one of the avenues to getting the storage we need into the system.
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of going to be one of my questions. Do you think that in, I don't know, maybe not 2030, but maybe 2040, they'll just be a part of the furniture, distributed batteries and batteries on poles, which we've also seen, and as well as home batteries. Do you think there's a scenario, that there'll be too many? I think, do we feel like batteries are just going to be something that become such a standard feature of the grid in all shapes, sizes and forms that we'll kind of wonder what all the argy-bargy was about?
Well, I think so. And the way that we think about batteries is, there's where we've got a capability to deliver batteries that are lower cost, we should be leaning in and doing that. But we should be making sure that we have the approach in place to support whatever type of battery it is. So, for example, we're doing a lot of thinking, and we've already, approved approaches for, EV batteries to discharge into the grid. And there'll be a lot of EVs that will be parked and plugged in for a lot of the time. So that's a huge, storage resource that will become available to us. Home batteries, less than 50% now are in VPPs, and so they're not necessarily supporting the system as well as they could. But we believe and expect that VPPs or some sort of level of system interaction, two-way interaction with home batteries will increase, and we want to be supporting that with tariffs and models like Edith that make our system more dynamic. And we see that there'll be a lot of storage at substations and that sort of thing to help offset the need for transformer upgrades, extend the life of assets, reduce the loading at certain peak times of the day. So there'd be good use for that at those times. And then there's going to be grid scale storage as well. And so there's a lot of things, there's a lot of moving parts there. There's not going to be any winner of the battery race. I think there's going to be a role for all of those different parts of the system. But I think one of the things we've got to think about as an energy system, not just networks, but everyone, is that the job is not just creating electrons and transporting them, but it's being thoughtful about, transporting them not just but through space, but through time, right? So, if you've got an electron, when is it most valuable to be used? How cheaply can you generate an electron? And then how can you, hold that electron for its most valuable use? And so as a network, we've always transported electrons over distance, and now we're saying, well, what's our role in helping transport those electrons over time as well, storing it when we've got too much and releasing it when prices are high and the value is high. So it's great fun to think through these things, because it's genuinely changing the way the energy industry is working. And we've seen this huge challenge with energy transition. And the thing that just encourages me so much is to see the volume of storage that we're rolling out at the moment, and the expansion in the manufacturing base that allows us to hit these eye-watering numbers. This is a cause for great optimism, and it's a great excitement for people like myself and many others in Ausgrid and other networks in other parts of the system who love an intellectual, technical, economic, philosophical challenge. And here we are meeting that challenge and coming up with some pretty cool answers.
Now, I'll just step back to the costs, because that has been one of the criticisms, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
that,
sure.
Can networks do it as cheaply as homes can do it? And if they can't, then why should consumers be paying for that? And that's something that I wanted to sort of unpack quickly, is that we should make clear that when a network puts a cost on its regulated asset base, that's something that's recoverable through the bills. And it's part of that stack we were talking about before that has all sorts of things. And one of the things we're very lucky with in Australia is that we do have extraordinarily reliable electricity networks. I think it's something we take for granted a lot in this country, considering examples everywhere, all around the world. So we're lucky in that sense, and we pay for it, which to me is worth paying for. But obviously everything within reason. And for that there's a huge role for the regulator to play, the Australian Energy Regulator, for governments as well, setting policy. And all of this is what we're seeing now, and I guess is the benefit of these sandbox experiments that make sure we are, it all is balancing out. But can you say, hand on heart, that the cost of putting in these community batteries and then recovering that cost, that the benefits are outweighing the cost to the consumer? Is that something that is happening?
I'm confident to be able to say that, and there's a few reasons for that. So firstly, the subsidy is $25 per kilowatt hour, which is lower than any other subsidy for storage. So we can confidently say that we're achieving this at a very low rate. Secondly, in terms of what gets put on the RAB and is recovered from the rate base, it's very, very small. And that's really attributed to the benefit of those sort of 30 hours a year that we get to take the battery back from the market participant who's bidding it into the market, and benefit consumers. And how do we benefit consumers? Peak shaving, so we don't have to build a new transformer. Voltage management, so we don't have to go out and play with taps every day, so it's a lower operational cost that gets passed on to our customers. But also hugely important today is much lower levels of solar curtailment that come from voltage variations from peak load when the sun's really shining. So some really real benefits there. But as a proportion of the battery, it's tiny. And then the battery is largely paid for by us tendering out the control and operation of that battery to a market participant like an Origin or an Energy Australia, who then bids that into the market. So we run a tender for those, and they pay us less than what they think it's worth, obviously, because they need to make a margin on their commercial entity, and so they're buying this as a cheaper than other forms of storage to manage their portfolio. So the fact that they're paying in a competitive process for these batteries, we're getting a rate of return that justifies our investment. Customers are getting better network outcomes, lower voltage variations, lower curtailment, lower future network investment, and the subsidy is tiny compared to others. All those things tell me that I'm right to be confident that we're delivering an outcome here for the community which is worthwhile. And so that's why we're doubling down. Now, the cost question is a really good one, and we're delighted that people like Tristan, Edis, and others are going to hold us to account on it, because we should be held to account. We're part of the energy system. Our costs, like everyone else's in the energy system, costs are ultimately borne by our customers, and so we should be held to account. And so, I encourage that conversation, and I think we've seen early days with the very first community batteries, subsidies that were like $1,500 per kilowatt. And at that number, you should not be building lots of community batteries. No doubt, Tristan, you're spot on. But at $25 a kilowatt hour subsidy, you should be building as many as you can as quickly as you can to help us get through this the bumpy period of this transition until we get to the point where we've got a really decarbonized, reliable, secure energy system, as we know we'll all get to. But it's going to be a journey to get there. So I'm confident, and that's why I'm passionate about it, because I've seen the costs come down, I've seen the benefits rise, and I've seen us get better at it.
Yeah, and this is what it's about, isn't it? There will have to be learnings along the way, and not everything is going to be at its most efficient when you first start doing it. But the important thing is exactly that we do keep having these conversations, that we keep trying, and we keep trying to work out what's best for the grid and then for consumers as well.
And a bit of my idea is better than yours is good for competition. Yeah. I'm better, so that's great. It's great to have that, but I don't think what we shouldn't be doing is just going, don't do that. It's like, okay, what we should be saying is, okay, you prove to me you should be doing that, and so hold us to account, but don't judge us by the ills of the past. Judge us by what we can deliver today.
And there's been some concern that, and this is a tricky one, that, the regulator doesn't sort of have enough teeth and isn't firm enough about making sure that people are honouring their promises or keeping their costs down as low as possible. Is there something we can do to fix that, or is that just something that...
Well, I think if I'm honest, I think that was probably a legitimate... Well, is it legitimate? People were right to have concerns when they were looking at some of the what was described as gold plating, and there was legal challenge rights that the regulated businesses had over the regulator, and there was a feeling at a time, probably in the 2013, 2014, 2015, certainly during that period, that maybe network investment had got away from the regulator, and that we were seeing some pretty ballistic bill rises as a result. And so the reality is the regulator took action. Then there were some pretty big reductions in the rates of return. We're still down at rates of return which are amongst the lowest in the world as a result of that. So in some ways you could say networks are paying for the sins of the past in terms of that much lower return. Rights around appeals were restricted and largely removed, and so now I think you see that most networks are not underspending their capex allowance. The capex allowance has been really quite skinny, and most networks are overspending their capex allowance. So I think, again, if I look at the history and how this network industry has evolved over time, we're judging networks today by what we would be legitimately right to judge them by 10 years ago. But it's moved on, and networks today are so much more efficient. Ausgrid had a nominal price per average revenue per customer of over $800 in 2014. We're not going to get anywhere near that for another 10 years, because the amount of efficiency work that's gone on, we've really reduced our costs. We make much better, much sounder, much more granularly and analysed decisions around investment, and we're running our network in a much more risk-aware way. And so you're seeing those cost savings. Now, people aren't feeling those cost savings because everything else has gone up. But judge us on
transmission companies are the big spenders now.
Exactly.
I mean, to be fair, there has to be big spending, but
there has to be, and the market price has risen for a number of reasons. You've had these external shocks, the Iran issue, and coal closures. We know those need to happen, but that creates problems, short-term problems. So there's all these things happening, and I feel in some ways that networks are still being judged on the ills of a decade ago, and we're not getting credit for the work that we've done since then. And just give us a shot. Let us have a crack, and if we don't succeed, fine. But I think we've got something here that's relative with low risk, it's low subsidy, and it's big benefit.
Well, personally, I would like to have a nearby battery that I could call on and maybe have a little photo on the fridge.
We'd love to make that happen for you.
I'm in Melbourne, so...
Well, it's going to be tough then. Yeah.
But yes, I know I said we weren't going to discuss curbside charging, but I will go back to that briefly. That and other things. how does Ausgrid look at other markets around the world and see how they've handled these things and how regulatory issues like this have been handled? And you know, I wonder sometimes whether, as you say, we here in Australia in our bubble get a bit stuck in our, old world order and forget that there's a lot of innovation and change going on everywhere.
Well, yeah, and look, we learn and we share, and I'll give you a couple of examples. So, for example, we are country mile ahead of most others in terms of the rollout of rooftop solar. No arguing there. There's no doubt about why that's happened. We've got a lovely sunny country, so now we're learning things well ahead of where other people are in terms of the challenges that the networks and the system have from minimum load and some of the changes in dynamic and two-way flows, that sort of thing. And so we're the ones who come up with energy storage as a service. We're the ones who come up with the community or shared battery concept, because we're facing those challenges first. Europe and other countries have had a take up in EV, which has gone much quicker and much more significant than we've had, and they're facing those challenges first. And so where they look to us to learn about how to deal with solar, we look to them to how to deal with EVs. And so we do collaborate and we do learn. There's always going to be differences in markets and differences in how systems operate. So London, for example, we've spent a bit of time talking to our colleagues there. Councils own the street lights there, and that's where a lot of the EV charging infrastructure has been rolled out in terms of by councils, allowing their street lights to have trickle charges. It's hard to get a decent capacity into that, like a little pole like that, but that's one of the ways that they've dealt with that solution. London doesn't have a lot of overhead power lines, so there's not a lot of power poles to leverage as an opportunity for EV charging. So that's why we see different solutions in London than we see here. But we spend a lot of time learning from the OEMs. There's equipment manufacturers about what the best way to roll out chargers is, and we spend a lot of time talking networks and councils in different parts of the world. What is unique about Australia at the moment is because most of the early adopters of EVs had off-street parking. Curbside overnight charging for people has not been a big thing, and what we've seen is that it's the absence of that in the community very close to my house being able to charge, which is making a portion of our community feel very reluctant about buying an EV. And so we've lent in and said, well, here's a model in which we're confident it actually lowers the cost for the community, because in rolling out this relatively low cost infrastructure, you're encouraging a lot more people to take up an EV. In a lot more people taking up an EV, a lot more electricity is consumed through the network, so the average cost for everyone comes down, and it comes down by more than the additional cost of us rolling out ahead of demand the infrastructure for the EV. So that's our view, and we think we've got the numbers and to prove that. But we're really open to the debate, and we encourage people to scratch at that, prod at it, and challenge. And if we all engage in the right way, then we're going to get the right answer. And our view is that we've got a role to play. But let's go through the consultation on the rule change and see where we end.
Well, that sounds like a good place to wind this up. I think, as you say, it's great. Having these conversations is great. And it's wonderful of you to give us your time and talk about it, and to hear that perspective from your side of the fence. And, networks aren't going anywhere. We definitely still need those.
Absolutely. And look, always a pleasure to come and have a chat. It's there's always something exciting to have a chat about. So look forward to doing it.
There really is. It's absolutely mind blowing. So yes, thank you so much for that, and keep us posted. Any more wonderful developments on your side, we will talk again soon. Thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you.
G'day, Alex Carey here, proud ambassador for GoodWe. The GoodWe ESA 3060 all-in-one commercial solution is available now from GoodWe wholesalers. With a massive 50 kilowatt hours of the battery eligible for the federal rebate, it's the perfect solution for small businesses. The commercial energy storage range from GoodWe is growing, with more models launching soon. Visit goodwe.com.au for more information or contact the local GoodWe team.
That was Rob Amphlett Lewis from Ausgrid, and a really interesting, some really good food for thought there. Had you heard of energy storage as a service, Rachel?
Yeah. I talked to him. I talked to him about it last year, and I was like, this seems too good to be true. This doesn't seem. And so the comms lady at Ausgrid was like, "Oh, you should talk to Rob. It's great."
Yeah. Well, look, because one of the issues I've always had is that I get it. I get, technically speaking, why it's good for the networks to put the batteries in, and they definitely would know the places where the network needs them, like, you know, where there's a lot of solar and maybe the network's not as strong. But I think what people were struggling is to see any benefits coming back to consumers. Like, how do you measure that? How do you definitively say that's a good thing for everyone, especially when you've got other parts of the bill stack that are pushing prices up, and people are just cranky and thinking, well, you know, networks are doing all this, but I seem to still be paying a fortune. So I think this is a really great thing in that it's tangible, you know, and it's something that is pretty easy. You can sign up, and I would certainly welcome that here if I could, you know, feel like my solar wasn't just because I'm home, so I can try and load shift as much as possible, but usually it's only a couple of people home during the day, and there's a limit to how much washing you can do in the middle of the day. So I'd love to know that my solar was going into a battery and being used by myself and my neighbours. That would make me very happy. But we shall see, and we shall keep this discussion going. No doubt it will keep going. And what else has been on the radar this week, Rach?
Well, following the rage bait spotlight thing that happened on Sunday, which, you know, was accusing the renewables industry of fostering slave labor in, I think it was the Congo, which was pretty quickly disproved by a number of people. I spoke to,
including our own Giles
Parkinson.
Yes,
he did. Yes, he had a lot of fun with that one.
Well, I think it sucked the life out of him, actually. But
I had a lot of fun reading it, and I think a lot of people did as well. But I followed that with a story, an interview I actually did last week with a man named Ed Coper. He has been mentioned on this show before, who basically analyzes public sentiment towards, you know, different renewable energy things using an algorithm that they put on social media and so on. And he says that this idea of energy independence, energy sovereignty, that comes from renewables, having specifically rooftop solar and EVs and so on, is just incredibly powerful right now, thanks to the Iran war. And he says it's been powerful for a long time, but politicians and home battery sellers and solar sellers and so on have realized this too now, and are beginning to really use that to say, you know, if you want stability in your electricity system, it has to be, you know, you have to control it. And I think Australians have long known that if you control the electricity that you use by it being on your roof and now in a battery, well, you know, it's a no-brainer, really, isn't it?
It is. And then if you can use that to fuel your car.
And that's beginning to spread around towards, you know, different things like large-scale solar and wind. Maybe not wind.
Yes.
There's
Now
too
we
many
just have
people
to
hate
see
wind.
if people can make the connection between climate action and cost of living coming down. That would be the real breakthrough.
Yeah, that hasn't happened yet.
No. But on that topic, I have another interview coming up with Tom Woodruff, who has just written a new book about this very topic. So look out for that one, because it will be very interesting. He's a climate policy expert. He's worked a lot in international negotiations, and he's really looking to try and help make that nexus between, like, as our own Chris Bowen likes to say, what's good for the pocket is good for the planet when it comes to energy. So yes, very interesting. And on that topic, we had another bit of a rage bait article about solar panel recycling that was in the Australian, and then said some crazy things about how, I think, basically it just was like, ooh, this is an issue, which has been an issue for quite some time. And then they got some ridiculous quotes from Dan Tehan, the Shadow Energy Minister, claiming that panels are not recyclable, which is absolute garbage. Pardon the pun. But yeah, so that was another big issue, and I think we did respond to that as well, just to remind everyone that yes, it's a huge issue that needs urgent addressing, and that the industry's been pushing for that for some 10 years now. And there are, I think, 7 companies now that have been trying also for years to make a sustainable business out of this, and who have the means to recycle panels. It's just there's a whole lot of logistical things that are still in the way, and that's what the policies are seeking to achieve. So
what I found interesting about that particular Australian piece of writing was that they kept saying, if they're still are sent to landfills, and Victoria doesn't allow panels to go to landfills, and it's another state, I think, as well, that has banned solar panels going to landfills.
Not
I can't remember which one it is.
but I know.
But like things are happening, and then there's the federal pilot that you've spoken about a few times on Solar Insiders. There's a pilot happening in Queensland.
It's the same sort of weird broken logic as this whole thing about the Congo. It's like, absolutely, this is a massively concerning issue that the whole world should be worried about, but it is by no means exclusive to renewables. And in fact, so many other of your electrical appliances are really the culprits behind that cobalt issue in particular. But so many things go to landfill.
Well, if the federal government had embraced nuclear as that hope, what would they be saying about nuclear waste? Goodness me.
I don't know. It really does beg a belief. It's like, it's not to say this is not a very important issue and it needs to be dealt with, absolutely. And there's no argument there, but it is. And to sort of say, oh my God, it's poisoning the soil and the water when, we've got these massive coal ash dams and
irreparable coal ash dams. These things that cannot be fixed. There's no money for it. There's no water for it. The technology is not there. Some of these
and there's
things
not a single coal mine or power plant that has been fully rehabilitated as yet in Australia. Like, let that sit with you as well. So there's a lot of one-sided reporting. Anyway. I think we'll bring that to a close for this week. As I said, we've got quite a few great interviews in the pipeline, including one that Rachel has done, follow up on some of the quite shameful energy supply issues we have going on in the centre of Australia and in the Northern Territory, not looking after First Nations communities nearly as well as we should with power, and missing some major opportunities to reduce diesel consumption as well. So look out for that one. And for now, we will say thank you very much for listening. Thank you to our sponsors, Pylon and Fronius. Thank you to our sponsors, Pylon and GoodWe. And we will see you next week with another episode of Solar Insiders. Thanks, Rach.
See you, Soph.
Solar Insiders was brought to you by GoodWe. Across residential and commercial installations, GoodWe's all-in-one ESA battery solutions support the solar industry with reliable, flexible energy storage. From rooftops to large projects, GoodWe is helping installers and businesses deliver smarter, clean energy outcomes. Discover more at goodwe.com.au. Solar Insiders is also brought to you by Pylon. Pylon provides easy-to-use solar design software for solar installers and retailers with pay-as-you-go pricing, no monthly costs and no lock-in contracts. Join Australia's top solar companies who trust Pylon to design high-resolution, CEC-ready solar proposals.